On Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My future mother-in-law seemed to hate me for no reason for 2 years, but when I discovered the reason behind her obsession with my fiancé's ex, the whole family imploded in seconds. A couple of days ago, I lost my temper during a family dinner hosted by my future mother-in-law. Let's call her Sharon. She has never accepted me and makes no effort to hide it. Although my fiancé has been divorced for 6 years, she can't seem to get over his ex-wife. Even though this woman treated my fiancé very badly and was unfaithful to him with one of his wealthiest friends, Sharon insists that it was all his fault. In fact, it was Sharon who introduced them, as his ex-wife's mother was one of her close friends. She practically arranged their marriage when my fiancé was just 25 years old, after only a year of dating. For the next 5 years, this woman made my fiancé's life miserable. Sharon is well aware of the situation, but she is still convinced that it was his fault that she left. On occasions, she has even said that she doesn't blame him because he simply upgraded to someone better to make his life easier. And why don't I agree with the idea that he upgraded? I don't think he was looking to make his life easier because he never worked. She was always a housewife. And even so, she needed a domestic servant, so she didn't really do anything around the house. She was a compulsive shopper, to the point that I think she had an addiction. My fiancé told me how she threw tantrums every time he refused to let her spend money the way she wanted. She doesn't have that problem now. The man she ended up with has a lot more money thanks to his family fortune. She was clearly a gold digger. I think you get the idea. She was the one who initiated the divorce. And just a few months after it was final, she married my fiancé's friend and they moved to another city. Since then, neither she nor her mother have maintained contact with Sharon, which is understandable. What is not normal is Sharon's obsession with them and her contempt for her own son and his feelings. 6 years have passed since then. It took a long time and a lot of therapy for my fiancé to get over what happened because his life was terrible during the 5 years he was married to his ex. Then 2 years ago, we met through work colleagues and started going out. At the beginning of this year, we got engaged. I had met his mother before. I felt that she didn't like me, but since our engagement, her attitude has worsened considerably. Before, at least, she was simply cold to me and tried to ignore me. But now she constantly attacks and criticizes me. I have tolerated it out of respect for my fiancé. But a couple of days ago, I finally exploded. Over the last few months, after we announced our engagement, she has developed an irritating habit of provoking me by using the name of my fiancé's ex-wife. Then she pretends to correct herself and says my name. I know it's not an accidental mistake. I know she does it deliberately, and I can see the smug look on her face afterwards. It's really mean. I didn't want to talk about it, but it was becoming unbearable during dinner. When she did it one more time, I decided to tell her it wasn't funny. I told her I knew she was doing it on purpose, and I confronted her about her behavior. I also told her it was ironic that she kept mentioning the name of a person who had traumatized her own son so much. This just showed how little she cared, and that if it were up to me, I would make sure my fiancé cut off all contact with her because she clearly didn't deserve a son like him who had remained by her side even after how she had treated him over the last few years. In front of everyone at the table, all the guests, I mentioned how she was as problematic as the ex-wife because she had played the same role in bringing that woman into his life and ruining it for 5 years, turning her into a nightmare. And instead of being ashamed and apologizing, she took pride in it as if she were a person without empathy. I told her that my fiancé's ex would have been the perfect partner for her and that she didn't deserve a son as good as my fiancé or a daughter-in-law like me. I got up and left, and my fiancé followed me. We went back home and I thought he would be upset with me, but he told me he was really glad that I had finally confronted her because he was forced to put up with her, but I wasn't. So it was good that I had stood up for myself. It's been a couple of days since then, and Sharon is flooding my fiancé's phone with messages and calls demanding that I apologize because she felt humiliated, disrespected, and embarrassed when I made that speech. She insists that she never meant any harm, but that the way I expressed it, she felt I was intentionally making her look like the villain in her own son's life. She has been shedding fake tears, but I feel no compassion for her. Am I the bad guy for lashing out at my mother-in-law in front of all her dinner guests? Update 1. Hello, Many people were questioning why exactly my fiancé has maintained contact for so long with his mother when he clearly does not respect her or her boundaries and shows no consideration for him. Many of you weren't kind either. You called him a doormat, a coward without character, and who knows what else. And let me tell you that if he were like that, I wouldn't have been with him in the first place. But he's not. He has his own reasons. To begin with, my fiancé's father died when he was only 2 years old. After that, it was his mother who raised him alone. She never remarried, hardly went out with other people. So now she only has her son by her side. My fiancé's grandparents passed away a long time ago, and his mother doesn't get along with the rest of her family. So she's quite alone. She doesn't have many friends either, mainly because she doesn't really have a good attitude towards anything. My fiancé has told me that he has considered cutting ties with his mother several times, but in the end he finds it very difficult to do so. He can't because he knows that she has sacrificed a lot for him, both in his career and in his personal life. He owes her a lot, practically everything he has, and I can completely understand why he finds it difficult to distance himself, no matter how difficult it is for him to be kind to her. Even after this incident, he has told me that he will try to patch things up, but if it doesn't work out, I am under no obligation to be nice to her. I don't owe him anything, and I don't have to put up with her attitude. If I were in his place, I would probably act the same way because she is not getting any younger. She is almost 65 and already suffers from various ailments. She has been asthmatic since she was a child, pre-diabetic for the last few years. She has heart problems, and she was recently diagnosed with arthritis too. So naturally we have to consider all this because, although she has enough money to support herself and could hire a nurse, it's not the same as having visits from her own son every weekend. She's not always unpleasant towards him. Sometimes she is exceptionally kind and goes out of her way to do things for her son, but there are also times when she is absolutely unbearable. They have a complicated and somewhat toxic relationship, but I can understand why he hasn't cut ties with her yet. I know that if I were in her place and my mother behaved like that, I would also find it difficult to stay away. Anyway, this is about my fiancé and his mother, and I hope this will at least prevent people from making horrible comments about him. You don't know the whole situation, and this is not about him and my mother-in-law at all. It's about me and Sharon. And on that note, I see that the popular opinion is that I have no reason to feel remorse in that. In any case, she is the one who should apologize to me for behaving this way for so many months. But I know she's not going to apologize, and I'm not naive enough to expect it. The only thing I'm going to do at this point is to stay away from her completely. As the situation stands, my fiancé has told me that I don't owe her anything, and I don't have to restrain myself around her. Until now, I had only done so for his sake because I know that she is not a very confrontational person, and, especially when it comes to her mother, she hates arguing with her. It's not that she hasn't tried before. Believe me, she has. But she is not willing to change. She's always been like that, and I'm sure that being a single mother for so many years hasn't helped her. She's not going to change. She'll continue to be grumpy, self-centered, and always believe she's right about everything. So she can continue like this. I don't have to tolerate it, and if she feels embarrassed about what happened at the party, she'd do well to remember this in the future and not look for conflicts with me unnecessarily. I think what happened was bound to happen at some point. I think it's good that there is someone to put her in her place at least. Now, I don't know what's going to happen because in the last few days, after trying to talk to my fiancé and get me to apologize, she kind of gave up when my fiancé said he wasn't going to do any of that. So we haven't heard from her for about 3 days. Tomorrow is Saturday, and my fiancé has said he is going to visit her and discuss all this with her and, if possible, get her to apologize to me. If that works, which I doubt, then all is well, but I'm still going to keep my distance. Update 2. Well, my fiancé visited his mother in the morning and came back just a couple of hours ago and told me everything that happened. Initially, she had even refused to let him in and said that after what had happened, she didn't want anything to do with him until he broke up with me or I apologized to her. She was quite adamant about that, and after a few seconds, he was about to leave, but then she finally opened the door and started complaining about how she couldn't believe he was really about to leave. She started to cry, saying that she had raised him on her own, that she had sacrificed so much for him, and now he couldn't even get me to apologize for insulting her in front of all his guests. She started to accuse him of prioritizing me over her and said she couldn't believe I was controlling him like this, which was absurd because she is the one who has always tried to control him. My fiancé defended me, and she got even angrier when that happened. All she wanted was for him to just blindly say that she was right and make me apologize. She wasn't willing to listen to any reason or logic, so they argued for a while she remained at the entrance to her house. She hadn't even bothered to invite him in. After a while, he got very annoyed and said that if that was her attitude, then they weren't going to get anywhere and he was about to leave. But then she invited him in and suddenly started acting normally, saying that she really wanted to make things right with him because she knew that at the end of the day, he was all she had. And no matter how much she acted annoyed with him or got angry, she still loved him and didn't want him to leave upset with her. This is a pattern they tend to follow, and once again, my fiancé came in. Once they were seated, his mother began to tell him that she had always wanted the best for him, and of course, she had been very disappointed when he ended up getting divorced because she was very sure that that relationship would have worked, but that didn't mean that she didn't care about him. She said that in moments of anger she might have said certain things that could have hurt him, but she wanted him to know that she didn't mean it, obviously referring to when she had insinuated that it was his fault that her ex cheated on her and left with his richer friend. And as always, my fiancé told her that it didn't matter whether he had said it in a moment of anger or not. The fact was that he kept repeating it every time she was angry with him, and that wasn't right. It was not acceptable for her to say things like that, especially because it made him feel terrible, and despite this, he would keep coming back to her because he wanted to be a good son. Just as in the past she had always been a good mother to him, but all he wanted from her was for her not to make it so difficult for everyone around her to be there for her. That's all I asked of her, so I wanted her to apologize to me because the way she had behaved towards me in recent months was not acceptable either. Unlike him, I wasn't obliged to look after her. I wasn't obliged to go and see her every weekend and try to patch things up no matter how annoyed I was with her. I wasn't him. She hadn't brought me up, and she hadn't done anything for me that would make me indebted to her forever. So she needed to understand that, and if she didn't want problems in the future, then she should apologize to me. But, of course, she met with resistance because her mother was not willing to apologize to me at all. She said she would gladly apologize to him, but after how I had behaved with her and had embarrassed and disrespected her in front of so many people, there was no way she was going to come and say sorry to me. She insisted that I was the one who had acted much worse, and maybe she had been a bit cold and mean to me, but that didn't excuse my behavior, and she wasn't going to talk to me unless I apologized to her. He tried to reason with her as best he could, but she just wasn't willing to give in. Finally, he became very frustrated and told her that in the future, if she wasn't invited to the wedding or if she wasn't allowed to be part of her grandchildren's lives, then she would know that it was her own fault because she had the opportunity to make things right with me and she refused to do so because she was too proud and too self-centered to admit that she had made a mistake and had been horrible to me. In the future, she would end up with no one to blame but herself. And that finally seemed to get to her, I guess, about the grandchildren in the wedding. During their previous marriage, when they started having problems, his mother had told him to just start trying to have children so that all their problems would go away, because I guess they would have new worries to face. At the time, he had tried to suggest the idea of having children to his ex-wife, but she didn't agree. She said she was too young for that and that she wasn't interested in becoming a mother before the age of 30, so it never happened. But my fiancé knows that his mother has always wanted grandchildren, and I'm 31, he's 37, so we still have plenty of time and I definitely plan to have children in the next few years. And about the wedding, I had already decided that if this woman doesn't apologize to me, then there will be no place for her at the wedding, because that's supposed to be a day full of happiness, a day meant to celebrate the couple, and if she can't be happy for us, if she can't respect us, then she has no place at the wedding. I guess that made her think, and after a while she told my fiancé that she would think about it, but that she needed some time to process things too, because she had been really hurt by my behavior, and she knew that she had been a bit mean to me too, but it hadn't been as bad as what I had done. So she needed some time before deciding what to do, and until then, it would be completely fine with her to stay away from me. I was totally okay with that, because I intended to stay away from her anyway. If I planned to be this difficult in the future after I got married, then I guess it would be better for both of us to have no contact at all. This is all my fiancé told me after I had returned home, and I told him that even if his mother decides not to speak to me, I am completely fine with that. In fact, I would prefer it, because I don't want to speak to her. I don't want to have anything to do with her because she is a very difficult person, and, as I said, I don't know her anything. I said if she really wants to, we can have her at the wedding, but she will have to stay away from me for the whole ceremony, and when we have children, she can even spend time with them, but I don't want to have anything to do with her personally because she is toxic. I just don't like her. He said that everything he had said was perfectly justified, and that was it. We didn't argue or anything about it. I know he has his duties towards his mother, but I really appreciate the fact that he doesn't let that get in the way of our relationship. I'm lucky to have him, and so is Sharon. If only she realized it instead of taking it for granted all the time. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and we've had virtually no contact with Sharon for the past 2 weeks. Yesterday, out of pure concern and anxiety, my fiancé decided to pay her a visit because it was quite unusual for her not to contact him for such a long time. He had been waiting for her to call, whether she wanted him to visit her or not, and whether she wanted to apologize to me or not. But then she said nothing at all, and there was total silence on her part. So he visited her yesterday, and, just like last time, she refused to let him in. But this time she was firmer than before, and said that last time she had softened up a bit because she didn't want to lose her son. But then she had thought about the situation over the last few weeks and couldn't believe that he had really tried to manipulate her into apologizing to me when I didn't deserve it at all. He didn't understand what she was referring to, so she reminded him that he had said that if she didn't apologize, she wouldn't be able to be part of his wedding or see his grandchildren when they were born, just because she didn't have a good relationship with me. She said that was him trying to manipulate and confuse her into apologizing to me when in fact it was I who had created all this trouble. She said that it was now very clear that he had become a puppet for me and that he no longer had any respect for his own mother, which was why he had insisted that she bow down to me and apologize to me when it was she who had been disrespected. He said he had had enough time to think about everything that had happened, and now he was not falling for her manipulation and mental gymnastics, and that he needed to leave because she had decided that she didn't want anything more to do with him. She said she had enough money to support herself, and that she was a dignified lady. She didn't need to depend on her son for crumbs of affection and love. She could survive perfectly well without anyone else, and, given that he had decided that I was now more important to him than his own mother, who had done so much for him, she was perfectly happy to let him go at this point. My fiancé was very surprised. He hadn't expected this, but when he realized that she was serious, he finally exploded. It doesn't surprise me. This has been brewing for a long time because even the most patient man has his limits. So he began to raise his voice and told her that for years he had put up with her irrational behavior, her outbursts of anger, the horrible things she says to him, and although they have fought, he has always tried to reconcile with her because he knew that she had sacrificed a lot for him and he couldn't forget that. Mainly because she wouldn't let him forget it. He had always tried to be a good son to her and had tried to remember the fact that everything he had been able to achieve in his life had been thanks to his mother. So he had really done everything he could, but as she had decided that she no longer needed him, he told her that it was finally time to say goodbye because he had also finished. He didn't owe her anything anymore, and if she didn't want to talk to him, then maybe it was best for them to never speak again because he was running out of steam. He had tried over and over again to explain to her that this kind of behavior would get him nowhere with his family or even his friends. But she had never bothered to listen to him, and now he had lost the only person who had always tried to stay by his side. He told her that he was definitely choosing me over her because I truly loved him and didn't traumatize him the way she had. I respected his boundaries, I respected him as a person, and I genuinely cared about him. I wasn't constantly trying to control and manipulate him like she was. He told her that he would continue to choose me and that he was glad that I was part of his life now because, thanks to me, he no longer has to deal with her, and now for the rest of his days, she can sit alone in that house and continue to play the victim because he is finished with her. Having said that, she walked away and that was it. His mother didn't even try to open the door and try to apologize. So clearly she was finished too. Whether she wants to hold on to her anger and lose her son is up to her, but I'm really happy that my fiancé finally cut her off because I think that despite all her best attempts, she never valued him, and this is good for him. He needs this. I'm proud of him, and I know he's going to be upset for a while, but in the long run, this is for the best. Update 4. Hi everyone. It's been 6 months since my last update, and earlier this week my fiancé and I finally got married. We had a beautiful ceremony. Everything went according to plan, and we are really happy with everything. Her mother wasn't there. She wasn't even invited, and in the last 6 months, we haven't spoken to each other once. The last we heard from her was that she sent my husband an email about 4 or 5 months ago saying that she had changed her will and now he wouldn't receive anything. She had basically disinherited him and left most of what she owned to charity. I guess she expected him to approach her after that and apologize, but he didn't even care. For a couple of months after he stopped talking to his mother, he was initially a little upset. However, over time, he seemed to be happier, even more than he used to be before. He told me that he is actually glad that he and his mother no longer talk because, despite everything she had done for him in the past, ultimately it didn't make any difference because it really did make his life awful in the last few years. She was quite a bitter and unhappy person, and perhaps couldn't bear that her son was trying to be happy in his life. So that's why she tried so hard to make him unhappy too, and now that they're no longer talking, now that he's not obliged to visit her every month, he's much more relaxed and I'm really happy for him. We're both delighted to have started this new chapter of our lives on the right foot and hope to be as happy as we are now for the rest of our lives.